The Sam Sorbo Show is brought to you in partnership by the Herzog Foundation.
Hi there, I'm Sam Sorbo. In this episode of The Sam Sorbo Show, I speak with Abby Johnson, who is a leader in the pro-life movement. I wanted to find out, what is it that makes her tick? How did she become the staunch warrior that she is today? I think you'll be blessed to hear her responses. In this interview, which appears in two parts, the second part is behind the paywall on Locals, so head over to samsorbo.locals.com and become a member. And thanks for watching.
Sam, welcome back to the program.
I'm glad to welcome Sam Sorbo.
It's great to have you here.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Sam Sorbo Show. My guest is, I'm very excited to introduce, she's a staunch supporter in the pro-life movement. She had her own film. You might have guessed who she is. Abby Johnson, and we're going to talk about her personal story, her ministry, and all the things that she is busy with, including a new documentary. So welcome to the program, Abby Johnson.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for having me on.
I've got the whole tech thing happening over on this side, but it's great to see you. You're doing such amazing work. Can we just take it back to, because this is a question that I've wondered for a long time. And I don't know if you remember when we first met, I totally fangirled you. I was like, you are my hero, because we've been lied to so much, and you discovered the lie and you decided to double down and say, not on my watch. And that was a very brave thing to do. And in fact, if you believe anything in the movie, you know that it was a very brave thing to do. But what was it that got under your skin enough for you to risk yourself for the truth?
Yeah, I think that last year of working at Planned Parenthood, there had been, several things that had made me really question, like, what are we doing here? And I think it made me wonder, is it that the organization is changing, or is it that finally I'm high enough up in the organization that I can see what we've been about all along? And what we had been about was abortion. We had been about killing children. That was who we were. We sold cheap contraception in hopes that women would get pregnant so that they would come to us for an abortion. And that sounds sinister. That sounds like the plot of, some sort of, villain movie, but we were kind of the original villains when it comes to human sacrifice, child murder. That's who we are. That's who we were. That's who Planned Parenthood is. And I had tried to deny that for many, many years. But ultimately, it was when I saw a live ultrasound guided abortion and I saw a 13-week-old baby fight and struggle for his life against those abortion instruments, when I knew, there's humanity in the womb, there's life in the womb, all of these things that I had tried to deny for many years. I just thought, I cannot deny them anymore. And once you're hit with that truth, you can either continue to go down that dark road of sin, or, at that crossroad, you can choose life, you can choose the Lord. And so I ended up choosing him, and I can't say it wasn't a scary choice. It was a scary choice. Sometimes doing the right thing is scary and it's hard, but I'm so thankful that I did choose righteousness in that moment.
What part of your faith journey were you on at that point? Did you lean into God at that moment, or did you become more fervent later?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I feel very blessed because I grew up with a really strong faith foundation. So I grew up, I mean, I was saved when I was 8 years old. I remember I was in church. My parents and I were in church my whole life growing up. And so, I was baptized Easter Sunday, 1988. Um, I grew up knowing the Lord, loving him, serving him. When I went to college, though, I mean, I actively stepped away from my faith. And so it wasn't like some accident, like people say, oh, I fell away from my faith. Well, I mean, you don't really fall out of it. You have to take active steps to walk away from the Lord. And that's what I did. I walked into worldly things. I walked into fun things. Sin is fun. And if it wasn't fun, we wouldn't want to do it. And so I started doing the fun things, the college things. And that really separated me from, staying on God's path for me, his perfect plan for me. And once I started participating in these sinful things, once I started making these sinful choices, then that wall went up and it was harder for me to hear the Lord. It was harder for me to understand his will for my life. And I think that's what ended up guiding me into the doors of an abortion clinic. When I worked at Planned Parenthood, I mean, I went to church every Sunday. But I went to a pro-choice church. I went to an Episcopal church. The Episcopal doctrine in the United States is very pro-abortion. In fact, when we were confirmed into the Catholic Church, we were confirmed by a female lesbian pro-abortion bishop into the Episcopal Church. So that's who they are. Their national doctrine supports abortion. And so I thought, okay, this
What
is
was, sorry,
my place.
what is confirmation so that people understand we were confirmed? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so it just means that you are part of the Episcopal Church and that you are now going to uphold their values and their teachings, which
And was that you and your
they're
husband or you and your
my husband,
family?
yeah, and my daughter. My daughter was actually baptized Episcopalian as a baby. So we were, I mean, we were in this, right?
Well,
And
when you have a
um
church that's telling you, yes, God, but also all of this sin is like super okay because God believes in abortion, which I've heard,
yeah.
like I've heard people preach that.
Mhm.
What are you gonna, what? It's not your job to refute the church. Well, I guess it is, right?
Yeah, like, oh yeah, I mean our priest definitely taught that abortion was fine. Our priest would send women to me at Planned Parenthood if they needed an abortion or they were, unsure if they wanted to have an abortion. We'll just go to Abby, like she'll help you, which basically meant she'll talk you into getting an abortion. And the Episcopal Church is one of the largest donors to the RCRC, which is the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. It's a religious group that helps religious women pay for abortions. You can
Didn't
look that
actually,
up.
I didn't even know that that exists.
Yeah,
Like,
you can look it up. It's rcrc.org.
we'll put it on
Um,
the screen. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this is just, and I did know better. That's the thing. I did know better because I grew up knowing that this was wrong. But when you are in sin, when you're living in sin, Satan is telling you, oh, hey, look, these people, they're supporting you, right? And they're Christian, like they're so-called Christians. I remember organizing an event at a doctor's house. Okay. This was a very well-known doctor in our community. She was an OB-GYN, very pro-abortion. And she wanted to have an event at our house. And there was a man that had written a book and he was head of Clergy for Choice.
Okay.
And he had written a book called Sacred Choice, talking about abortion, how abortion was sacred and how it was sacred in the eyes of God. And
In
it
the eyes
was
of
sacred
Satan.
in the eyes of church, in the
Yeah.
church. And so he came down, this man came down, and we had a big event for Christians at this OBGYN's house to help convince them that abortion was in line with Christian teaching, that abortion was perfectly fine, and it was packed. I mean, it was a full event, all these Christians from all different denominations trying to justify abortion, right? And that's what we did.
Hi there. So for years, I've been harping on the problems in our schools and the fact that most of our government schools, our factory schools, have been overrun by this progressive ideology that is really at war with our traditional American values, our Judeo-Christian values. And parents have finally started waking up more and more, which pleases me to no end. But they're worried about what to do. They are not sure which way to turn, and that's why it gives me great pleasure to announce my continuing partnership with the Herzog Foundation. So the Herzog Foundation is a trusted source for K through 12 Christian education. They have a really remarkable suite of resources for parents and for families. They have an online publication known as The Lion and a network of podcasts, including mine. So they can offer a wide range of advice and information for Christian parents to make the best decisions regarding the education of their children and the values that they instill in their children. And so if you want to find out any more about this remarkable organization, just go to herzogfoundation.com. That's herzogfoundation.com. Thanks so much.
Are you looking for quality homeschooling resources? Apologia offers top-notch curriculum for all ages. It's designed to inspire a love of learning and a strong foundation in faith. Head over to apologia.com and use code SORBO10 to get 10% off your next purchase. Equip your children with the best education tools and save today at Apologia, the trusted choice for homeschooling families.
Can you quote Bible and verse to justify abortion?
Yeah, so really the only verse that they would use, well, a couple. So they would basically say that in Genesis, when it talks about how God breathed life into Adam, they say that that is proof that life begins at birth. Because life doesn't begin until you take your first breath.
No, life doesn't begin until you're fully formed an adult then, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I have to refute. I just have, like, it's
So they
like,
say,
yeah.
yes, so that's what they were teaching, that, God breathed life into Adam. So God breathes life into us when we take our first breath. So that was what they would say. And then they would also talk about how God is fine with abortion because of a series of passages in Numbers, where women they were told to take concoctions to bring about miscarriage or something like that. They would use these verses that were taken totally out of context to justify evil, and that's what you have to do. You have to justify. And I can tell you, Sam, though, like, how I knew what I was doing was wrong. So I went to work for Planned Parenthood in college. And when I was in college, when I met this woman who was with Planned Parenthood, and she was telling me about all the great things they did and how, yes, you want to be a part of us and you want to help women and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, yes, of course, this is what I want to do. I signed up. I went back to my apartment. And I didn't call my parents to tell them. And that's how I know that I knew what I was doing was wrong, because I've always been very close to my parents. And so this is what I tell kids all the time. If you have grown up in a home where you have loving, God-fearing Christian parents, don't ever trust a decision that you would not tell your parents about. Because I worked at Planned Parenthood for a year and a half before I told my parents where I was working. And that told me right then that I knew what I was doing was wrong. And it took me a lot of courage to finally tell my parents. And of course, they had the reaction that I thought they were going to have. They were not happy that I was working at an abortion clinic. And it caused a lot of tension in our relationship, but not enough where they were like, we don't want to have a relationship with you anymore.
Was that just patience on their part, or were they, I mean, how do I ask this? They were against abortion. Did they know why they were against abortion, or were they just sort of casually against abortion because it's wrong, like?
No, my parents were definitely pro-life. They were not like activists or anything,
Right.
they didn't. I grew up in South Louisiana. We didn't have abortion clinics around where I lived or anything like that. My parents didn't grow up in families that were, out protesting or, at the March for Life or anything like that. But definitely they knew abortion was wrong. My grandmother actually, we didn't find this out until not long before my grandmother died, but my grandmother was actually offered to abort my mother. My grandmother contracted the German measles while she was pregnant with my mom, and the doctors were like, well, you've got to have an abortion. Your child's going to be disabled. She's going to be blind, whatever. And my grandmother and grandfather were like, okay, well, then I guess we'll have a child that's blind or disabled or whatever will come.
Right.
My mom was born. She was fine, perfectly healthy, no problems. But my grandmother did not tell my mom that until probably like 5 years before she died. And she just kind of said it like so casually, like, oh, yeah, the doctors wanted me to abort you, just like very casually. And my mom was like, what? And it really makes you think. I mean, if my grandmother had listened to the doctors, if she had gone through with that, my mom wouldn't be here. And I wouldn't be here. And my 8 children wouldn't be here. And it just makes you really understand how abortion truly affects generations. And it really does have a profound impact on the world.
Yeah. All right. We're running out of time. I need to take a break. I want to mention you have a documentary that's coming out called Unthinkable, and you don't know exactly when it's going to come out, but we'll show pieces of the pieces from the trailer in the next segment. And also, your book is What's in Mommy's Tummy. Do you want to briefly talk about that? Bring us into the break.
Yeah, sure. I wrote this is my first children's book. We now have books out that are describing abortion to children. And I saw a book coming out about that, and it just made me infuriated and it made me disgusted and sad. And so I got on a plane. I was headed to an event. I got on a plane and just in my fury, decided to write a children's book to counter all of this horribleness that's out there in the world for our children. And as a mom of 8, I certainly have experience with children's books. So that's
Right. And you mean that there are books out there justifying abortion to children who are way too close to the idea of the event, and they probably shouldn't be talked to about it. It's really outrageous. Okay, when we come back, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your education background and also what advice you would give to your younger self. So in a minute, we'll be right back.
Thanks for listening and watching to The Sam Sorbo Show. If you want to hear the rest of the episode, head on over to samsorbo.locals.com and subscribe to hear the rest of the episode.
Views and opinions expressed in the Sam Sorbo Show are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views and positions of the Herzog Foundation.